This is Audiogyan, and I am your host Kedar Nimkar. Welcome to a deep dive into the minds of luminaries from the Indian creative world.
Waste not, want not. This can be explained as if you're not wasteful with resources you have now, then at a later date, you'll have those resources to use as you want and need. By not wasting, you will not be needy later. And today, to discuss all about waste ecosystem and the sector at large, we have Rahul Nainani with us on Audiogyan. Rahul has a passion for sustainable policies that create value, with one eye on the bottom line and the other on tangible social impact. Rahul, along with his co-founder Gurashish Singh Sahni, founded ReCircle in 2016 as an innovative, multifaceted solution to India's burgeoning waste management woes. ReCircle has instituted flagship initiatives such as ClimaOne Plastic EPR Service, plastic neutral programs, and ground level community collection drives. We'll be talking about this and more. Welcome, Rahul, to Audiogan. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show. And yeah, thanks for giving your time.
Thank you, Kedar, for having me on the show. I'm excited to have this chat with you today.
Awesome. So yeah, as I started with the introduction about knowing the waste ecosystem and the sector at large, and also started on a philosophical note of waste not, want not. We'll see where our conversation unfolds. But yeah, just to kick off the conversation, I wanted to understand, like, how do you sort of define waste, and is there a systematic way to study? Are there broad categories? How does waste is generated? I'm clubbing few questions, but yeah, just as a
Uh,
conversation starter.
no, sure. So, Kedar, I think how we define waste at Recircle I think I'll try to take that up later on, but because we
Sure.
have a really different mindset in terms of how we are looking at waste and rethinking waste. But waste for the general audience is, I think, typically something that we discard and has no use of it going forward. We have this mindset of what is out of sight, out of mind, and that's what we generally think of it as waste. Largely, in the technical sense, waste is generally divided into mainly into 3 to 4 main categories. One is your household organic waste, which is basically your food waste, compostable waste that generally comes out of your food leftovers and your cooking waste that comes in. The second being your dry or recyclable waste, so which is essentially largely packaging. So your paper, plastic, metal, glass, e-waste as well to an extent will come. So e-waste would be a separate subcategory under the dry waste, but it would largely still come under the dry waste or recyclable waste category itself. And the third being majorly your hazardous waste. The hazardous waste would typically include your biomedical waste, your sanitary pads, diapers. Generally, how we like to define it is something that touches your body and you're putting into your dustbin. Is generally that is going to go into your biohazardous waste. Uh, these are the large three main categories that would come under your household or municipal solid waste. And then, of course, there will be a much larger segment of industrial waste that comes in as well. So things that are coming out of your manufacturing setups, your industry setups, which would obviously be very typical to this nature or the scope of the industry that they work in. So that's how we largely look at waste. Ideally, something that you basically discard and you don't think that you need is what we call or what humans call as waste to start with.
Got it. But yeah, like I have two follow-up questions on that. So one is, at least in the traditional middle class family, you see gila kachra and suka kachra, right? So just two things. So are these made simpler to at least filter out at a top level, or because when, like, right now I'm based in Singapore and I'm really confused. There are
Yeah.
like five different cans, and it says cans and it says paper. Now I don't know where, because my can is a paper can, so I don't know where to put in. So how do these sort of, where do these categories come from, and why do these categories exist also?
I think typically, so broadly, what we have been taught is gila kachra, suka kachra, like you rightly said, wet waste and dry waste. But we do miss out on the biohazardous waste that we
Hmm.
also generate in terms of sanitary pads, diapers, medical waste that comes out of households as well. And I think it's a big thing to make sure that at least if not, so if you go to developed countries like Singapore, you'll have probably a 5-way or a 7-way segregation, which will have your cardboards and paper separate, glass separate, can separate, paper, and then your food waste and your other waste that comes in, landfill waste that you might have as well. But main to three main categories is which we need to look at least if you're looking at the Indian ecosystem. You know, make
Mm.
sure you're and I somewhat do not like the classification of dry, wet, and reject, largely because it's very confusing. Like you rightly mentioned that cans, my can is my paper is made out of can. Should I make put it in the can waste or the paper waste itself? And which is where, a lot of times when we do our awareness workshops, we also get this question is that I called for, let's say, I called for some food from a restaurant. Now it's dry. The packaging is dry, but under to gila kachra tha. So
Mm.
should it put it into the wet waste or the dry waste itself? So I think how we've simplified or how we like to put it is that whatever is man-made, which is basically comes from the earth, is your food that comes out needs to go into your wet waste or your compostable waste. Whatever is
Mm.
whatever is nature made comes into your, whatever is made from the earth comes into your wet waste. Whatever is man made, things like your paper, plastic, glass, metal, electronics, XYZ needs to come into your dry waste segment of things. And then the third being your biohazard reject waste is typically, like I mentioned, the easiest way to say is that is if there's something that touches your body or if you have bodily fluids inside it, that's what you put into your biohazard or reject waste. Now, the main reason to actually have 3 or 5 or 10 categories of segregation that needs to be done is because based on the segregation that happens at source, something this waste can be actually utilized for some other purpose. So, if you're not sorting your waste out at the base level itself, you cannot do much with the waste going forward. So if wet waste is segregated properly, it can be composted, dry can be sent for recycling, and then the relevant treatment to be done with your biohazard waste as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Very interesting. In fact, I'm so sort of curious to know aage kya, like what happens with the waste when it goes by, but we'll circle back on that if we have more time. But yeah, so and so can you sort of also share some stats about, like, at least in India, because I saw your report and it shows some in tons, right? Millions. And
Yeah,
so, like, yeah, so what's like, if somebody has to comprehend these numbers and draw a parallel, because what we see typically are landfills and like some
correct.
outskirts where things are dumped and you can't really, like, yeah, it's just like mountains of stuff put on each other. So like any numbers, anything to understand and see the landscape and also understand the waste ecosystem, right? How does sort of, especially in
Sure.
India.
So India, just to start off with the headline, India is the third largest waste generator in the world. We generate about 62 million tons of waste. Now, the number, when I also put it into account, the calculator is very overwhelming. You really don't understand, what does 62 million tons of waste look like. But trust me, having visited multiple landfills across the country, the number is very, very large. To
Hmm.
contextualize it, let's take a smaller number to start with. I think, like let's take a city like Mumbai or Delhi is generating about 8 to 9,000 tons of waste every single day, which is roughly equivalent to about 1,500 full-grown elephants. So imagine 1,500 full-grown elephants of amount of waste that you're generating every single day in a big city like Mumbai or Delhi. Now, if you can extrapolate the numbers to get what 62 million tons of waste looks like, and I'll leave that to your imagination. But just to give you that every single day that we basically are we think that it is just one dustbin that I take out of my house and that's done and dusted, but it's mountains and mountains of trash that we are generating every single day. Maybe one so one and the challenge with this is, of course, you might say that India is also the largest in number of population today,
Hmm.
so it's bound to say that okay, we will be the largest waste generator also very soon, which is going to happen. But it's a big problem. It's a big problem not in just terms of the environmental aspect. So, like, of course, waste and leading to global warming, irregularities, and things like that, that the environmental part of it is covered. But another point is that India also has a large informal economy that actually just works out of scavenging waste for a living. And even though there's no direct data point and there's multiple sources say different things, but it's estimated that about 3 to 4 million people in India today actually just make a living out of scavenging waste from landfills and dump sites. So the environmental problem is large enough, but what often gets ignored is the social problem that is also leading to these people actually that clean up our trash after us. And these are not the municipal workers that actually, come and collect your trash, but these are informal scrap aggregators, scrap dealers, scavengers that just scavenge the recyclable waste from our trash to make a living out of it. And they work without any dignity. They work without in the worst of the conditions that you can imagine. They work without any minimum wages. Forget working conditions for that matter of fact, because that doesn't even exist in this ecosystem. So there is a environmental problem, and then of course there's a social problem as well involved. And often when I used to, when and I was as naive as anybody else that's listening to this podcast before we started ReCircle, because I'm like कि हाँ मेरे घर के बाहर कचरा है कोई लेके गया and it disappears like magic. It's like a magic trick for us, right? We put it outside our doors and it automatically disappears, but it actually is all getting accumulated, like you mentioned, outskirts of the city, but not in all cases. Sometimes it's actually in the middle and the heart of the city, which we don't even realize. So, an example being that I come from Mumbai and I'm born and brought up over here. And Mumbai has the largest dump site in Asia. It's
Wow.
150 some hectares of land that are just used to dump trash in the middle of Mumbai city. And this is typically comes, it's an area called Devnar. Now, Devnar is something that we generally would probably, how we remember it is that कि लोनावला के रास्ते में आता है and it smells and we don't really know what happens, but it's in the heart of the Mumbai city if you look at it on the map.
Yeah.
And it's affecting there and it's affecting a lot more people around it as well. And
Yeah.
how soon is it going to start affecting the rest of us is just a matter of time. And this situation is not just Mumbai, but may it be a Delhi, may it be a Bangalore, may it be a Hyderabad, may it be a Shimla, may it be a Guwahati in Assam. All of these landfills are overburdening and there are just mountains and mountains of trash. I think I can go on and on about the data and the statistics part of it,
Yeah.
having visited so many of these landfills. But yeah, I think this should give some
Yes,
kind
sir.
of context that it's a massive problem. It's a massive problem to start with. Environmental is something that we do see, but we often forget the social or the human part of it because all of it is being managed by people at the end of it. And that's what also needs to be taken into consideration when you look at the waste management sector.
Yeah, it's crazy. And you mentioned about, so two quick questions. You mentioned about Devanar. I believe there's, I don't know what it is called, Kasai Khana, whatever it's called in English, but like all those animal waste also go in there. So it was be just crazy to like, yeah, manually scavenge stuff there, right?
It's all the waste from all over the city is now being dumped. So Devnar is technically supposed to be shut down, but then it's moved to Kanjurmarg and Mulund, the other dump sites. But if you look at it from the map, they're all interconnected. It's just one area has been shut and then the second is put on. But like you rightly mentioned, that it's slaughterhouse waste, it's
Slaughterhouse. Yeah.
food waste, it's pretty much hotel waste, hospital waste. Now, of course, there are regulations to manage certain waste, but the reality is that most of it, which is not segregated, will be collected and dumped into landfills.
Yeah.
In Mumbai and Devnar, but across the country in different parts of the country, there are just mountains of it.
Yeah. And you mentioned we are the third in the world. I'm sure per capita basis we'll be like
Yeah,
much less. But so who are the first one? Like America is the first.
US is the first. That's
Yeah.
correct. America
Yeah.
is number one. And I would like to believe it's another European country that's a number two, maybe Germany, if I'm not wrong.
Okay.
But I'm pretty sure that US is number one on the list over there. So yes, per capita, like you rightly mentioned, that we might not be in the top 10 or top 20 on the list,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the population is large now. We need to figure out what to do with
Correct.
it. So
Correct.
let's
Correct. Yeah.
it's easier, it's easier to find loopholes like yeah, maybe per capita we're not the biggest, but we are still
Yeah.
generating that much quantum. that we
Correct.
need to still
Correct.
look at.
No, the reason why I said is because at least in, again, middle class Indian families, especially in the Maharashtrian community where I belong from, there is a concept of sort of or upcycling or recycling within the house to a certain extent. But yeah, I can't claim sort of some pride in it because eventually, as a country, we have. Uh, okay,
No, I think Kedar, I agree. In fact, it's just this Indian mindset, and in my household, we were just my mom will still have a full drawer full of plastic bags that she'll never throw away and keep reusing, and everything is being
correct.
reused. But
Hmm.
what we are forgetting our roots, and the younger audience is just like this consumption habit is
Yeah,
basically
yeah,
spoiling us. But yeah, I mean, there is still that mind that mothers and grandmothers in the house will still not throw away something that has been there for like 20, 30, 40 years. But we
yeah.
are in this take, make, dispose economy in a way,
Correct, correct.
which is the challenge.
Yeah, I remember just like if you lift your mattress, like bed mattress, uske niche like at least 20 polythene bags or whatever, something will be there. In fact, because of Amazon and food delivery services, it has created more chaos in this. Anyway, we'll just digress. So, I would like to know like how, like if you can just very briefly, I know it's will be like a huge supply chain, but
Yeah,
how does the entire setup work, right? What are the entities? And as you mentioned that the municipality would be like a more organized sector, but
correct.
still like maybe from that ghanta gadi to or maybe you putting out like you're just keeping your dustbin outside to finally dumping in the landfill. How does it typically happen?
Yeah. So of course, Kedar, it's a very, very fragmented and lots of players in the ecosystem that are there. But trying to keep this brief at a high level, there are two kind of parallel supply chains. One is, of course, your formal. So whatever technically the rules in India ask you to segregate your waste. So if you're sorting your waste, the municipality should collect your dry separately and your wet separately and your biohazard separately, for that matter of fact. And which in 90% of India's cases we do not segregate. So we
Wow.
mix it, and the municipality collects it and then takes it to a dump site and basically dumps it over there. There is a small portion of it which also goes to processing centers where the further sorting, segregation that happens up to an extent which is possible, and that's part of the formal supply chain. So roughly about 80-90%. I mean, let's say upwards of 70% gets just directly untreated and dumped into landfills. About 20 to 30% would reach a processing center, which will be going under further sorting, segregation, and then it goes into probably composting, recycling, or end of life, for that matter of fact, which is more of the formal supply chain. The other interesting part is this shadow supply chain that actually runs, which is parallel to the formal supply chain. And I say this is a shadow supply chain because this is your sweeper in your building, your scrap dealer in your kabadi wala at your neighborhood, to your larger scrap dealers in the end of your outskirts of the city. And these guys basically actually do the hard work of sorting, segregating whatever they can from our trash and making sure that that reaches a recycling facility. So an
Hmm.
example being, once you before the waste leaves your house, there will be a house help in your house which typically takes out your bottles, takes out your high value scrap dealers, or in most middle class families, you also see them that we have this tendency of not throwing newspapers, cardboard boxes, and calling your local raddiwala or kabadiwala
Hmm.
and selling that material to them. So whatever can be taken out, your house help will take out, or you will take out from there itself. If you don't do that, then your building sweeper will take out as much valuable material from there. If he doesn't do that, then a municipality van will also be able to take out, scavenge through whatever is valuable from that material, which they take out. Now, this goes to a small scale scrap dealer, which is typically your Addiwala or Kabadiwala at your neighborhood, which who does the primary level of sorting of plastic, alag say paper separately, glass differently, metal separately, which then gets sold to individual dealers after that, which is a specific dealer for plastic, specific for paper, specific for glass, who are aggregators who do the post processing in some cases. So, plastic, again, we look at it as plastic, but there are 7 grades of plastics. And within each grade, there's further subgrades that need to be done before it reaches a recycler. So at our facility, we're doing almost 40 levels of dry waste sorting in between just paper, plastic, glass, metal up to an extent that happens over there. So this happens through individual scrap dealers that only work with one commodity and do the further segregation of it. And then post they further segregate it, there's some pre-processing. So either they compress it into bales or they shred this material, which is then sent to a recycler. So I'm talking about the dry supply chain right now, but dry waste of plastic, में PET bottles का there'll be a separate recycler, shampoo bottles का there's a separate recycler, paper में newspaper there's somebody else, cardboard is somebody else. So there's this parallel shadow supply chain that just runs behind which we just don't have any idea about. That does honestly does a very good job with the limited resources and the limited recognition that they have, because without them our situation would be even worse in terms of
Correct.
our landfills being overburdened. So at each step of this trash following the trash flowing through our from our house to the end destination, there are multiple people that actually scavenge through this and make sure that as much as it can be recycled is being collected and recycled, and of course whatever is not then reaches the landfill. Now, at the landfill sites, also there are waste pickers that scavenge through that waste as well. Now, of course,
Wow.
it's not in the best condition, but it's happening across the supply chain from the beginning to the end. So, and which is why I say, even though you think that you like when you talk to anybody and say that why you not segregating your waste, most people will say that my municipality only sends one truck, and why should I say, if even if I sort it, they will mix it in that one truck after
Hmm.
it leaves my house. But technically or honestly, that's not true. There'll be somebody, your municipality might mix it, but before that, there'll be somebody else that picks it up, or your municipality will pick it and take it separately. So even if the government has not provided you with the right infrastructure, do your bit at least of making sure you are sorting your waste,
Absolutely.
because there'll be somebody or the other that will make sure that is done. Maybe not in the right fashion and it's not the right way to do it, but it is still happening. And I don't think you would want somebody to scavenge through your trash where you have sanitary pads and diapers to take out plastic bottles from it, which is just not hygienic or is not the right way to do it, right? So at least bare
Yeah.
minimum is that sort your waste at home.
Wow. This is so amazing. It's like I just want to have a small plug here. In fact, these Audiogyan conversations have been so enriching. An episode which will come out next week. It's about designing trucks, and I spoke to Satya Gangaselan, and he's VP of Design at Ashok Leyland, and he spoke about the entire supply chain and the 100 moving parts while making a truck. It's paint job, and it's
Yeah.
designers, it's testing, the drivers, the manufacturer, the spare parts. It it blows your mind, right? Like there's so much happening at so many levels. Amazing, amazing. So like and because if we have like well segregated sort of cans at public spaces, or if you educate somehow through your workshops or generally at large, will it like how will it change? Like I'm sure in better like developed countries there will be some sort of a mechanism. Maybe they're picking up the cans, and so are we sort of putting the ownership on the people and the society as opposed to organizations when we create these segregations at a much more fundamental level? Is that the only objective, or?
So I think, Eda, the problem is so large, and that you need equal participation, and maybe not equal. You need more participation from some players as compared to the others, but everybody needs to do their bit.
Hmm.
Now, one thing is that maybe in a Singapore or in Europe or US or in developed countries, you might have enough infrastructure and the right way to do it, but I don't think you can copy paste what is happening in developed countries in a country like India, where
Hmm.
where leave aside waste characteristics, the traditions, the culture changes every 25 to 50 kilometers. You can't just copy paste what's happening in the West and expect it to work over here. Even if we had the capital, even if we had the resources and we put in as much energy into it, you can't do that. I don't think that works. Now, uh, I think yes, at a consumer level, I feel that we need to do our small bit of, sorting our waste, and then we also have a larger power in terms of buying the right products, because we are the ones that actually end up buying from supermarkets. But at ReCircle, we believe that if it needs to be large impact that needs to be created, the ownership at a large level lies on the businesses and the organizations that produce or generate this waste. So yes, at individual level, we need to do our bit, and we can't, just say that okay, till somebody else does it or the government does it, we will not do it till then, or till the business does it, we won't do it till then. We need to do that at our own level. But what we see is that businesses are the ones that actually design this waste, and honestly, you rightly mentioned. I mean, most of the things actually come down to design. Honestly, in
Hmm.
this aspect as well, because
Correct.
we have to design waste out of the ecosystem. That's the
Hmm.
thought process. So what when we start looking at waste is, once we are done using a product and now we're like, this is waste, now what to do with it? But this journey actually starts at the when you are designing the product itself. So when brand owners or businesses are designing products, they need to see if, how will this be easy to recover? How will this be easy to recycle? Can this be made into refillable? Can this be made into reusable products? So if this is at the when we're making the product itself, and at that stage you're actually thinking of what will happen at end of life, you would probably make a product which is not waste and can be used as a resource at the end of it, as compared to thinking about the problem once it's already created. So
Correct.
at ReCircle, we typically believe that businesses are a big key stakeholders. They need to take the action in terms of paying for the infrastructure and recovery of the waste that they're generating, and also doing a large systemic change in terms of redesigning at the start itself, because that's what will make the change happen in the long-term perspective of things. So businesses are key. Consumers need to do their segregation work, and then of course government needs to play as a catalyst to build in policies, systems, processes to ensure that the industry of recovery flourishes at a large level. So
Hmm.
it cannot be just one. If it cannot just be one stakeholder doing their bit, it needs to be everyone doing their piece, playing their part in the whole large puzzle.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because everyone is creating waste. So, yeah. In fact, I remember I did an interview with Hemant Jha, I think episode number 237. It's called Honest Structures with Hemant Jha. And they create furniture and they call it honest structures is because everything is made from a thought process to understand that how will it end, right? What's the thought process? I think
Absolutely,
that would be a good episode for you to sort of listen. But
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And speaking about government, I'm sure like after the latest BJP rule, we have been hearing a lot of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan and things like that. So like the second part of this entire conversation is about ReCircle and how you guys are working towards it. But just like a segue to that, like how I've like is there a real impact? Obviously there is, but like how much of it is optics or how much of it is real? Plus, how have these policies helped entrepreneurs like you in this entire ecosystem?
No, I think, like I mentioned, that government needs to play that catalyst role.
Mm,
It's and I think the Swachh Bharat movement, along with a lot of policy shift that's happened over the last, let's say, 5 to 7 years, has played that catalyst role. So, Swachh Bharat at least has brought in enough awareness across the nation that this is a problem and this needs to be done. So that mass level awareness that needed to be created, it has done that to an extent. Is
mm,
it perfect? I would say that in India, the ecosystem is such that, nothing would actually be perfect. It's always moving parts, and
mm,
there's more that can always be done. But I think it's a good move towards getting people aware and getting people up from where they are. There are case studies in different parts of the country where there's been a much larger impact that has been created, and there are case studies where there's not much that has happened as well with the Swachh Bharat movement. So, like in Indore, which is like
okay, okay.
our case study model, that if you want to talk about waste, you have Indore, but somehow or the other come in there. in that conversation, and it's been tremendous. I've gone and seen the work that's happened over there on ground. Also, some small cities. Ambikapur model is also something that has been doing very well. But the ecos, like I said, it's like I was mentioning that you can't copy paste what's happening in the West to India. You can't actually also copy paste what's happening in Mumbai and Delhi, and you can't copy paste that Delhi is happening in Hyderabad, because our cities are also so unique and unique in its own way that you need to have customized models. But coming back to the point that Swachh Bharat has been a big eye opener for most people. Along with that, there has been a lot of development in policy that's come in. So the solid waste management and the plastic waste management policies came in. So solid waste management was amended after 2 decades almost in 2016, which puts a lot of these ownership and responsibility of the different stakeholders in place, source segregation and things like that. Plastic waste management policy, which is also linked to the EPR work that we do at ReCircle, did not exist. So they've carved out plastic waste as a separate waste category from the solid waste management itself. Came out in 2016 for the first time, and there's been regular amendments and revisions that are happening till date. So over the last 5-6 years, there they are putting in ownership on the producers to manage their waste responsibly. So in terms of the ecosystem, the policy has made an impact in terms of getting putting the ownership on or the responsibility of the relevant stakeholders to the right people, and at the same time working towards creating systems processes. Are they perfect? I would say no, they're not perfect, but they are working. The intent is towards the intent is correct. The intent is right, and it needs to be implemented in the right possible way. So it's definitely adding as a catalyst that at least we are now aware, and we know what each stakeholder needs to do. Maybe more at some level, less at some level, but it is creating movement to move forward in that direction at least.
Yeah. Yeah. As we also grow up in our career hierarchies, we notice that most of the time, I think maybe 100% of the time, the intent is great and right in the right direction. The challenge is execution a lot of times, right? And I can see a stark difference when I now come back. It's been just like few months outside India, but when I come back, there's continuously some work happening, right? There's some construction going on, and now I've started understanding why they call developed and developing. It's a big difference. Like you see, like
Yeah.
things are developing and they are progressing in the right direction. Cool. So yeah, moving on to ReCircle, right? Tell us about like what are you guys exactly doing? How did it start? Why did you think? What made you venture in this sort of space? And yeah, we'll.
Yeah. So I'll start on a journey of why I got into it to start with,
Mm, mm,
and then maybe how it's began and what we're doing. So I come from a background of finance. I've done my graduation in accounting and finance, and then done my CFA. And honestly, like most people, not in my wildest dreams did I ever think that I would be in the waste management sector, managing waste for a living, for that matter of fact. Not quite literally, but in a way that we are doing this as an organization level. Our journey, when we started off, we went for something called the Google Startup Weekend. Gurashish, my co-founder, and I had gone for this. Gurashish and I go back. We were school friends, so we know each other for almost a couple of decades now. But couple of points that basically got me leaning towards the sector was that when we were doing our research, and of course coming from that finance and numbers background, we realized that India was actually importing trash from rest of the world. So we were importing tons and tons of paper, plastic, glass, and other waste from Europe, US, and Middle East to just keep our recycling industries running. And that was quite ironical because, having been born and brought up in Mumbai and traveled quite a bit in India, the one thing that I'm pretty sure, maybe you can second me, Kedar, is that the one thing that we don't have shortage for is waste.
yeah.
We've, we have enough amount of waste in our country, and it felt odd to see that we are actually importing this waste from rest of the world. And there we thought that there was an opportunity. I thought that there is some value to be created. We realized that it is more of a recovery problem than generation problem. So we ventured into the space, very naive, young, out of college. And initially, of course, our model was quite different than what we're doing today, because we also realized that how we can create larger impact. But we realized that there's a space to create some impact in the space, create some value for stakeholders in the ecosystem. That was one of the driving factors in terms of getting into this space itself, the numbers part being one. And then over the next 5, 7 years that we've done this, I managed to visit a lot of landfill sites across the country, and the situation is like in the most simplest way is bad. That's the in one word itself. It's really bad. And it's the same across Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, all cities across India. Some might be doing a little bit better, but it is still bad, the situation. Uh, so we that's what drove me to the sector. To basically, one was the numbers, and then eventually over the years also the impact that we can create in this space. Because we've seen how the work happens, and that's what drove me to create to get to what we started as ReCircle. Uh, we so what we do at ReCircle is we're building a traceable reverse supply chain for plastics. So the industry, like we earlier spoke, is extremely fragmented, informal, has a lot of moving parts and puzzles around the ecosystem, but it's still doing a good job, is my thought. So our idea was to create a business model which is inclusive, where we partner with the existing informal supply chain, bring them as the key stakeholders or partners in our ecosystem, formalize them to the extent of as much as we can, and we have larger goals for that. But we've started somewhere. I would say we're not where we want to be, but we've started somewhere. So we work with these collection partners. These are scrap dealers, aggregators across the country. We track this plastic waste from them to the final recycling or end of life. So to ensure that it doesn't reach our landfill and reaches the right recycling factory. So we've basically brought in traceability and transparency in a supply chain that typically was didn't even exist, overshadowed, did not we didn't know what was happening over there. Now, how we are monetizing it is that the material that is flowing through our supply chain is converted into plastic credits. So similar to how carbon credits work, we are working on plastic credits and selling these to big businesses with the likes of your Unilever, Cokes, Nestle, Mondelez, Dabur to help them go plastic neutral. So essentially, what we're doing is that we've given the ownership, the responsibility on the brand owners to take action to actually take action to actually go plastic neutral while impacting the entire supply chain and working towards formalization. So we are of course a B2B first business. So we believe, like I was mentioning, that the responsibility lies in the brand owner's hands. So we are tracking this material through our tech platform, integrating collectors, recyclers, ensuring that the revenue that we make from this plastic credits gets trickled down to the stakeholders. So there's enough incentive for the collectors to get formalized. So working towards, so a lot of our work revolves around giving them social security, giving them access to government schemes, working towards better working conditions, minimum wages at the collector level. So there's a lot of effort that goes on that level. While we of course sell these plastic credits, and then then there are smaller sub verticals that we work towards in terms of consumer awareness engagement. So a lot of awareness workshops. We use art as a medium to get people to get aware about the work that they do, get people to aware about the waste management efforts, how to segregate their waste. We have zero waste events that we help event companies to go zero waste. We have zero waste corporates. So a lot of the other ancillary work which goes on around the back end, which is basically awareness and services that we provide to different corporates. But the large effort is to formalize that ecosystem and bring transparency and traceability in the supply chain by getting brands to pay for it. That's what we're doing today. But the vision for ReCircle is to close the loop. So when I say close the loop, today we track this material from collection to recycling. But as next steps, the aim is to track this recycled granules post recycling back into the supply chain of brands that we work with as ethically sourced recycled plastic, thereby ensuring that we reduce the need for virgin plastic, also increase the demand for recycling. And this is what brings me down to the point of where we started off, is that the designing of the product needs to be thought of. So we will be able to provide you the raw material, but how do we design that this material can flow through the supply chain and come back as raw material to make a new product out of it? So simply put, a beverage bottle that you buy and you dispose gets recycled, gets converted back into a beverage bottle, which reduces the need for more natural resources to be taken out, and we move into a closed loop solution. So that's the vision, and that's what we're heading towards. But currently, we are tracking it from collection to recycling.
Yeah, that's pretty noble. So, one follow up on that to understand the credit piece, and
Yeah.
excuse if this is a little naive question, but I've always been curious. So, when you say that you give plastic credits, say to Starbucks, they buy those, and that money which you get is repurposed for these things what you mentioned. Is that correct understanding?
So in simplicity, let's say if a Coca-Cola is selling 10,000 bottles in the market, with our supply network, we collect these 10,000 bottles back on behalf of them, ensure it gets recycled, and sell them these credits so that they are able to say that as much plastic they put in the market, they have taken the ownership of recovering as much plastic they are putting in through our network itself. Now, if let's say we are selling one credit for $10, now this credit money is then trickled down to the collector, to the recycler, to make sure that they have enough incentive, they're getting the value for what the recovery that they're doing. So portion of it goes as direct monetary additional income to the supply chain stakeholders. And then we keep a portion to do all of these additional activities that I was talking about in terms of
Sure.
formalization, your social security, health camp, all of the extra work that we do is part of our initiative to basically formalize the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, what they're doing is basically buying these credits to offset their entire supply, or yeah, what are
Offset
the
their waste that they are
waste?
producing. So
Correct.
how
Yeah,
much
yeah.
ever production that they're doing, they're offsetting it. And this has actually become a compliance as a part of the plastic waste management rules that have been coming out, which I spoke earlier about. There's a concept called EPR, which is Extended Producer Responsibility. And this EPR requires producers of plastic waste or brand owners that produce plastic waste to recover as much plastic they put in the market.
Hmm.
So it's linked to the compliance. It's also linked to their sustainable development goals. So why businesses are doing this is also a big question. So one is the compliance. The other is that most of these big brands have committed that we'll be net zero. We'll use less plastic. We will go plastic neutral by 2025, X, Y, Z. So to align that and to make sure that there's no greenwashing in this entire ecosystem, we are making sure that there's transparency in that supply chain. It is not just credits that they're buying, but they're making sure where is it, where are they, who's collecting it, how is it getting collected, how is it getting processed. That is all being tracked as a part of each credit that this brand owner purchases.
Hmm. Hmm. I remember, like, I remember reading one. I don't recollect where exactly, but the concept was Shreyas and Preyas. So Preyas is like generally what you like, and Shreyas is typically the ideal. Uh, so Preyas can be little sexy, but Shreyas is what is required, right? I mean, it may or may
Yeah.
not be sexy. Typically, it's not sexy. I think you guys are in the Shreyas business. It may not be very sexy because a very close friend of mine also works in a similar in the carbon setup. And he says that it's not sexy, but it's very, very important for us as society, for us as maybe human civilization also, because yeah, and like within the workshops and the other activities that you do, I also read in the report about Safai Sathis, and so is this like trying to build a parallel ecosystem along with the government bodies, or like what's happening there?
So, one thing that we realize is that waste pickers or waste collectors is just not the right way to give the people that do this work. So
Hmm.
we call them Safai Sathis. Everybody that is in a part of our ecosystem and then helps us collect this waste. So that's how we basically define them as Safai Sathis. So is there existing supply? It's a shadow supply chain in a way that I would say, which is like basically your informal waste collectors, and we are defining them as Safai Sathis. So we work with formal players that are working with municipality as well as informal scrap dealers and aggregators that help us collect this material. And then we work towards the capacity building of the Safai Sathis that are part of our supply chain.
Got it. Got it. Okay. And you spoke about the ERP,
EPR.
EPR. Yeah. Uh, so what is like ClimaOne and like, yeah, are there any sort of other flagship initiatives from a technology standpoint or ground operations standpoint?
So ClimaOne is actually a tech platform that
Mm.
powers the supply chain. So ClimaOne has a collection partner app, it has a processor dashboard, it has a brand dashboard. So if you are a brand owner that comes and buys EPR credits or plastic credits from us, you will be able to see which collector, what recycler, and all of this data is being tracked through the ClimaOne platform. So it's not just me coming and selling you credits without having credibility of what's happening and where it's happening from. So ClimaOne is actually bringing all the stakeholders into one ecosystem, one platform itself, and bringing in that transparency, bringing in that data level over and above, just the supply of material that's flowing to ensure that if anybody is spending that money to go plastic neutral, it's actually going to the right place. And you're able to get that data point, you're able to get that reports that you require for your reporting, as for your compliance as well as your internal reporting, so that tomorrow if somebody comes and questions us, let's say if somebody comes and questions ReCircle, we know that who's collecting it and how is it getting collected, how is it happening, and we have the entire flow that's happening through it. So ClimaOne is actually an enabler in the circular economy space, and that helps us track this material. And on ClimaOne, there is basically EPR credits that we are selling. We also have this program which is for micro and small brands, so smaller MSME brands, which is called the Plastic Neutral Program, which is essentially voluntary action that businesses can take. So currently, EPR is only relevant for large brands, but the small brands, and we've got a bunch of about 20 of them that have already come on board, which are doing this as a part of their own sustainability activity, where they are taking up, if they're selling organic products, they're selling vegan and, cruelty free, they realize also that they want to do something, and plastics is here to stay, so they have to take some action. So that's where uh, the plastic neutral program comes in, which is for much smaller businesses and smaller brands that come in. So ClimaOne becomes that block that helps us track it, and then EPR is one of the service, plastic neutral program is another service, and then we have our regular collection drives in the city of Mumbai. So we actually go from door to door to pick up the recyclable waste, and it happens almost twice or thrice a month, where consumers can actually participate in recycling their waste with us as well.
Wow, quite intense. So I don't know whether I'm digressing a bit, but because of this building transparency, will like blockchain play an important role for you guys, or?
So the idea is to bring transparency and to make sure that it is accessible to the stakeholders. Blockchain, yes. I mean, you mentioned Shreya and Priya, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
And rightly you put us in the Shreya segment, not so sexy. But if you want to move to the Priya segment, blockchain will help us look sexy. But the idea is to be able to get people to get action and get traction on the system. So yes, blockchain is a part of us and our plan to become sexy. But at this stage, we are not yet using blockchain, primarily because we realize that we want to make sure that there is enough adoption that happens at the collection level, rather than blockchain becoming a barrier, because it has its own nitty-gritties in terms of development, it has its nitty-gritties in terms of cost. We are also dealing with a commodity which is waste. Okay, so we're not tracking diamonds, we're not tracking like the most best wine from France and things like that. But we're tracking waste at the end of it. So we are addressing the issues of non-duplication, transparency through our Web 2 portal. But yes, Web 3 is something that we will be looking at incorporating as well.
Great, cool. And are there any significant changes? Because I've seen a lot of startups getting funded when they just say carbon or waste or these kind of words. So has there been like other technological interventions which has helped you guys? How does sort of technology enable you to make this little more efficient?
I thought the sexy words were clean tech, ed tech, and med tech and fintech and things like that, which is where the money was going into,
Yeah.
and not as much as in your waste and clean tech and carbon.
Yeah, I'm
There
sure.
has been, of course,
Yeah, I'm sure.
yeah.
Like just like the A rounds or the B rounds are definitely happening. I don't know about C and D for other players, but you guys will sort of see it in a long run. But yeah, sorry to cut you.
No, I mean, yes, there's more traction that's coming in this space. People have realized that, clean tech and sustainability and circular economy are places that they need to look at. Clean tech is also very large. So there is money flowing into the EV space quite a lot. There's money flowing into the carbon space to an extent, to solar also to an extent. Waste and circular economy is still a buzzing space for us. A lot more traction that's coming in the the way that I like to put it is that there's more traction in the last 3 to 5 years. It has been slow, but it has been definitely as it has been much faster in the last 2 decades put together. So it is going towards the momentum is still coming in, but it's still slow, I would say. Maybe not as much as it is in the West. So maybe Europe might be seeing a lot more adoption and a lot more funding coming in. Indian ecosystem is coming to that traction level to get enough money flowing into the sector itself.
Got it. Got it. Cool. Before we conclude, I just have like two questions, but anything that I've missed with you guys are doing, because I'm right now more of a facilitator to understand. So anything that like which needs attention, which you want to share, because last two are little tactical. So
No, I think we've broadly, covered most of what we do, and also the context of what the waste ecosystem looks like. I think. Thank you, Kedar, for having put these nice questions together so that it covers most of it. And I think I can honestly go on for hours on
yeah,
the
totally.
ecosystem and the supply chain and the waste and what we do at ReCircle. But I think we've covered largely good context to good components to make sure there's certain context for the listeners
Awesome.
in this
So,
space.
yeah, then I'll have a plug again for you guys actually, because you guys are doing some good job. Um, most of Audiogan listeners have been designers and artists and little bit on the tech side of things. And how do you guys sort of attract talent, engineers? I'm like, because this friend is always figuring out who that designer would be who would like to come and design a B2B product, that too. So yeah, that too, as I said, like little unsexy, but how do you guys sort of figure out talent and
So, Kedar, we are a young team.
hmm,
We realize that domain specific people is doesn't exist in our ecosystem. Very few that have like waste management actually as a curriculum or as a course did not exist in the last 2 years or maybe 3 years ago. Where very few actually even wanted to study it. There was nowhere you could, not many places, let's put it this way, that you could actually go and study the sector itself. But we found, we're luckily enough we found a group of young passionate individuals looking at, and I think what keeps all of us driven is the impact that we create.
hmm,
We're recovering almost, I would like to say, about 9,000 kgs of waste every hour, every day, from almost 300 locations across India, while impacting more than 3,000 informal waste workers. And I think whenever we do have our town halls, one of the numbers that the impact numbers come in first. Of
hmm,
course, that dhanda needs to come, revenue aana chahiye.
hmm,
But that's one thing that keeps driving us, and we build the business model in such a way if the impact grows, the dhanda will automatically, grow as
hmm,
well. So we looking for people that that have the intent, that want to make change, and we have the opportunity of working with the biggies of the world. We've got some big names as our clients. So even though might not be as sexy, but I think the when you look at the kind of people that we are able to influence to make decisions, I think that's sexy enough.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
the big guys that we are able to influence to make change happen, and I think that's where we lie. And internally, of course, I think I would say, even if you don't think that we're doing anything sexy, go check out our social media and Instagram. Our young team is making is making this space much more fun. Even though we're looking at just waste, but I think we've been very creative, especially in the design space. We do this workshops with art. We've done a bunch of art installations in partnership with a lot of artists that help us, communicate the problem and the solution through art installation. We have for kids, we have a workshop which we use art for as a mechanism of, training them and bringing in awareness as well,
Wow.
which is really really fun. I mean, the art workshop is something that I also quite enjoy, and yeah, and I think that, and especially for the designers listening, I think this is even though yes, we're doing a lot more operational work, but design is going to play a key role in
Exactly.
eliminating or basically rethinking waste as a resource. Like we like to say, like in the beginning, I said that waste, the definition of waste is something that most people understand, but at ReCircle, we don't like to call ourselves as a waste management company. We are a resource recovery clean tech company, because what is waste for most people is a resource for us. So I think
Hmm.
designers have this, key part that they can actually play in terms of redesigning waste as a resource. So it's hard, but yes, I think we've been fortunate enough to get good people, and we're always looking for more.
Yeah, very true. In fact, this friend of mine who runs this also said that I said, "Can I join you guys?" And what qualification would you need? And he said, "You just need to care about
Yeah,
environment, care about society, care about people, care about nature." And I think that's good enough to. I mean, that's good enough. That's the job description, right? Yeah.
absolutely.
Cool. So I would like to conclude with one last question: is that what do you think? Like, I'm sure entering this space and looking at the crazy work ahead, I'm without even asking. I know that you are the most positive and optimistic guy, but what's the future of waste according to you? At least in India, can we be? Yeah, I wouldn't compare a Singapore or a Dubai or I don't know. Can should we or can we be like that? I think it's a un yeah, it's not a good question, but yeah, what do you think? What do you think future of East is?
I think, yeah, I mean, it's not a right comparison to make. I mean, to compare India to any Western developed country to start with, because we have our own unique set of challenges. We have our own ecosystem. But I think there's a lot to do. There's a lot of work to be done. But I see that, with the grassroots of where we come from, where technically waste didn't exist. Like we started off, you mentioned that we don't actually, if we look at our parents and grandparents, we didn't actually discard anything, or we did not waste. We reused as much as we could, and the idea would be to eliminate the word waste in the long term and use that as a resource. So a lot more structural and big changes that need to happen. But yeah, that would be my ideal, way of looking at this. That if we are able to design an ecosystem that just resources just flow in the ecosystem rather than even being wasted. So
Hmm.
it's an ideal way. It's an ideal world. There's a long way to go, but I see that if enough people come together, and this does not have to mean that you work with ReCircle or you do what, or you use our services, but it's to do your own bit in your own small way. We can make a much larger impact and make India, at least if not a Singapore, but create a case study for India as India itself that can be replicated across, let's say, the developing nations that could look at us, because our challenges are different as compared to the rest of the world.
Correct, correct. Yeah, from tropical climate to language to culture, everything changes, right? So yeah, definitely. But can we expect waste in even metaverse? I'm just like playing around.
I mean, metaverse technically runs on electronics, and e-waste is a category, and there's enough carbon that's being generated. There's a big debate of, even when you mention blockchain, there's a big debate on if blockchain is even sustainable to start with. So there's already waste in the metaverse, I would say. It's about which metaverse are you looking at and where are you looking at it from. Yeah, I mean, we need to figure out. So data is waste if you're using data and it's just lying over there. So it's definitely a waste. So there could be waste in the metaverse. There is already waste in space that has been identified. There's lots of satellites. So till humans exist on this planet, there is going to be waste. That's the bottom line. It's about how we look to deal with it.
Yeah. I remember one interview where it was somewhere on the TV for one psychologist, but I can draw a similar parallel in this entire ecosystem. Is that this psychologist was asked that, what do you think of positive psychology? And you have to answer in one word. And he said, good. And the reporter, the journalist asked, oh, no, it doesn't sound great. Can you tell us in 2 words? And he said, not good. And I was like, how come that's like, you just now said good. Okay, I'll give you 3 words and can you explain? And he said, not good enough. I think I draw a similar parallel that, yes, we have waste, which is good, but yeah, we have to do something about it. So, which the state is not good, but the kind of work you guys are doing at ReCircle, Rahul, I think all power to you. And yeah, it's just very good stuff that you guys are doing. So all the best and thanks for giving your time.
Thank you, Kedar. Thank you for helping us amplify our story. And it has been lovely speaking with you over the last hour. And and good. I think all the best wishes to you and Audiogyan as well.
Thanks a lot. Okay, thank you. That's it.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. For show notes and more Gyan, visit audiogyan.com. And if you wish to connect with me, I am at Audiogyan Moments on Instagram. Until then, take care.